Harry Austral GILL. Broken. As Harry was attending an Ipswich grammar school, he was there from the year 1902 until 1903. At this time, Charles Flint was a commanding headmaster at the school from 1901 until 1907. In bidding an infection farewell to you, I would urge you to try and cultivate every virtue, scorn all forms of presence, and so live that neither you nor the world will regret your entrance into it. The schooling at this time was always a fun place for Harry, attending it with his twin brother, Sydney Gill. He lived in Red Hill, Ipswich, with his mother, father, brothers and sisters. After finishing his last and only year at Ipswich Grammar School, he, not soon after, got a job as a bank accountant at the Bank of New South Wales. Harry continued his life for 13 years after attending Ipswich Grammar. He then enlisted for the Australian Imperial Force in World War I. Gill joined up in Brisbane on August 26, 1916 before heading to Sydney by train, but did not depart from Australia until the 23rd of December 1916 on board HMAT A64 Demosthenes. He was in the 8th Reinforcement 2nd Battalion, and also in this battalion was his twin brother, Sydney Gill. He fought in the Battle of Polygon Wood, where he was wounded. He was not wounded in battle, but instead he was wounded while sleeping by one of his own comrades. A recount from Harry Austral GILL tells the moment as it was. I am a private of the 52nd Battalion, 8th Reinforcement, and I sleep in number 16 hut in D. Lines, on the second bunk to the right going in. I was working in the orderly room till lights out at 10:15 p.m. on the 19th of June. When I went to bed, it must have been about 10:30. The noise of men returning from the night operations party aroused me. But I spoke to nobody and went back to sleep again. The next thing I was awakened suddenly by sharp pain in my rectum. The electric lights were on in the hut. I got up once and went outside the door and put my hand down on the injured part, finding that I was bleeding freely. I told someone to run for the doctor, and Major Hogarty M.O. came down and dressed the wound and had me placed in group hospital. I was brought to the hospital by Private Simmons and McMaster. I am the SMO of D Group. I was called to see Private Gill about 11:30 p.m. on the 19th of June. He was supposed to have been injured by the explosion of a rifle. I examined Private Gill and found that a ragged, irregular wound about 1 inch long, 1/4 inch wide. It only seemed about 1 inch deep, but the depth could not have been ascertained for certain. The wound was placed just above and to the left of the anus. There was a small abrasion in a corresponding position on the other side of the anus. The injury did not look as though it had been caused by a bullet, but in my opinion, by the explosion. He was placed in Group Clearing Hospital after the wound was dressed. After this injury, Harry Austral GILL returned to Australia on the 31st of January 1918 with the rank of private. Even while still on the front, he could not stop thinking about those who he loved. Not only his family, but his lost love, Beatrice Myers. Harry sent a letter to his love, who at that time he had not yet met. She did not return a letter and later moved on from Harry to get married to someone else. This letter reads,
Needless to say, I often visit these villages just to go to change from the monotony of camp life. I must close now, and don't forget to send me a few lines in return. Yours sincerely, Harry A. Gill. The population consists of about 150 whites and 30,000 blacks. The white people are mostly government officials who can live there 6 months of the year. It was amusing as the natives with the boats laden with fruit came to the side of our boat. There were thousands of these fellows, so fruit was plentiful and cheap. Such lovely bananas I have never seen in Australia. After leaving Cape Town, we were joined by 4 other troop ships and an auxiliary cruiser to escort us through the danger zone until we were within 2 days of sailing of England. Then a fleet of torpedo destroyers met us and guarded the rest of the journey. There was nothing at all to arouse my fears of dangers, as we did not see the submarines, although we were told on arrival at Plymouth that the submarine was 30 miles behind us and luckily could not catch up. Our first sight of England was most impressive. The sight was beyond my imagination. Saw cruisers, seaplanes, submarines, and lots of other things used in naval warfare. Our sea journey has ended after 10 weeks of the water, and we were all pleased to be on terra firma once again. The travelling was not ended there, as we had to do 150 miles by train, part of which was in daylight, and we saw some pretty scenes, especially the farms of Devonshire, which were lovely and green with the crops just coming out of the ground. Our camp is on the edge of Salisbury Plains. There are several little villages around which contain some quantity old buildings bearing a historical record. Needless to say, monotony of camp life. Dear Miss Myers, I have received your most welcome letter just before I went on my embarkation leave to London. Really, it is good of you to find a few minutes of your time to write to me, a person whom you have never seen, but I think I saw you as our train steamed through the harbour field. Didn't you, in the attempt to secure my address, fall over? I might say that was the only piece of paper I threw out of all the way at Brisbane. I am pleased you picked it up, as judging from the character of your letter, I would give anything to meet you. Perhaps if I am spared, I might have the luck when I return to Australia. Yes, I am a Queenslander. My people live in Ipswich, but my duties in private life carried me practically all over Queensland. It might be interesting to you to know that I am an accountant in the Bank of New South Wales, my last branch being Clonacarry. That is all I can say for myself, except that I am single and in the prime of life. You say you don't know how to write to a stranger. Well, your letter to me overrules your argument, as you started in quite the right way, and now that you have made a start, I hope you will continue, as I am sure your letters will be most comforting. Well, I haven't seen snow, and the novelty has worn off, as it's growing a monotony now, as about every second day we have a fall of snow. While the snow is falling, it is not so bad, but it is when the snow begins to thaw that we shiver. A number of our boys have not been able to stand the cold, several doubling in the lines while on parade. On case, it took 5 hours to bring the poor fellow around. So far, I have had good health, and really I have felt the cold on the Darling Downs, Queensland, worse than here. Still, we arrived here when the worst of the winter was over. Our trip over from Australia was the most enjoyable. We had a smooth passage all the way. Still, some of the boys suffered from meldema. We broke the journey at Durban, Cape Town. The first town we had 2 days, and leaves was granted for the whole time. Needless to say, I had a good time, especially riding about in the rickshaws. Durban is such a pretty place. There is a circular route tram ride there, and really the scenery on the route is marvellous. The zoo there is worth seeing, and of course I had to recognise my ancestors. At Cape Town, we had a 7-day stay, and we were really allowed to leave each day. Fortunately, I had an uncle there, and he gave me a lovely time and made me keep my hands out of the pockets, so my fun didn't cost me a half a penny. Well, I saw there everything that is to be seen. Had the luck of going through Cecil Road's estate, which is full of all kinds of avenues, so you can just imagine what a sight it is. Our next call was at Freetown. There we spent 2 days, but were not allowed ashore as we were under isolation from Menningtons. One fellow was buried at this town, the result of the above. Perhaps it was just as well we were kept on the boat, as the town is terribly filthy and full of all kinds of diseases. The population consists of about 150 whites and
Harry had many brothers and sisters who also attended Ipswich Grammar and Ipswich Girls' Grammar. His father was an architect who built about half of Ipswich, named George Brockwell Gill. George lived and worked in Ipswich for 55 years, leaving a lasting legacy with the landmark buildings he designed. These buildings included Brian High Fried, Ipswich Girls Grammar School, Woodlands, the RSL Memorial Hall, and Ferry Knoll. His mother was Jane Cole, who had many children. Her offspring were Harry Austral Gill, Sydney George Gill, Leonard Cole Gill, Florence Alma Gill Griffins, Marion Gertrude Gill, Horace Morton Gill, and Wilfred Howard Gill, who also served in World War I. After returning from war and healing up, he lived for many years and later died on the 27th of October 1969 and was buried at Rose Garden 24 in Warrenera Cemetery. I am a Queenslander. My people live in Ipswich, but my duties in private life carried me practically all over Queensland. Even though he finished his life with a broken heart, he continued his career with some damage done, still loving the school he attended. He showed leadership, integrity, community, and excellence in all aspects of his life. He was a true